Hello, hometowners. I'm Coach Kitt. I am doing a 3-part mini-series on how are we impacting our next generation. What does it mean to have an impact on the next generation? Well, let's define the word impact. It is to have a direct effect on someone or something. And the question is, are we having a direct effect on the next generation? Parents, grandparents, youth leaders, older siblings, people of influence, how do we impact the next generation? Let's look at a quote by Sidney Harris, a journalist for the Chicago Daily News and later the Chicago Sun-Times. Here's what he said. History repeats itself, but in such a cunning disguise that we never detect the resemblance until the damage is done. Well, history tends to repeat itself. If that's the case, let's go back and look back. If what I'm talking about or will be talking about had happened in history before. Let's go back and look the book of Judges, chapter 2. We're going to look at verse 10 through 11. It says this: after that generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things he had done for Israel. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight and served the images of Baal. There was something missing from the generation that just passed away and then the new generation. What was missing? Well, about 100 years prior to the book of Judges, a prophet Moses gave the people a certain commands that they have to follow and obey when they entered the promised land. Let's look at one of these commands in Deuteronomy chapter 6. We're going to look at verse 4 through 7. It says this: listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. There should have one God. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. In other words, there's a relationship between you and that one God. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home, when you are on the road, when you are going to bed, and when you are getting up. In other words, we should do whatever we can in our power to make sure that we transfer this faith that we have in that one God, to transfer that relationship. Deuteronomy 6, it's telling us that great care should be taken to ensure the word of God is passed on to the next generation. Our primary call as parents, leaders, pastors, influencers is to lead, to equip, and to instruct the next generation to the truth of God. If we don't do that, the world will equip, will lead, and indoctrinate the next generation to its own truth. Due to the failure of one generation, the next generation suffers. According to Judges chapter 2, the passage we just read, it seems like that the generation before neglected to lead, to equip, to instruct, and to pass on the word of God to the next generation. As a result, the next generation did not acknowledge the Lord, even though God's invisible qualities were present right in front of them. But the generation had no personal relationship with the Lord. The second thing, they did not remember his work. They were ungrateful. They had no personal awareness of God's power. Well, that's the same God who departed the Red Sea. That's the same God that led them to the promised land. That same God that did not know anything about his power. God has become someone that their parents related to, who did great things for their parents' generation, not for them. The tragic results for not acknowledging the Lord were that they did evil. Immorality reigned in their midst. And since there is no true God, everyone elevated themselves to the highest authority. Let me say it again. Since there is no true God, everyone elevates themselves to the highest authority. The prophet Samuel gave us a glimpse of the moral condition of the culture. Here's what he said in Judges chapter 21, verse 25. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Isn't that crazy? They become their own authority. The second thing that happened, that served the image of Baal. They got into idolatry. They traded a personal relationship with the living God for a false god, the image of their own foolish mind. And we are seeing the same trend in our culture today. Our young people are disengaging themselves from the church and serving a God of their own corrupt imagination instead of serving the true living God. The next generation is disconnecting themselves from the living God because of the lack of impact from the generation before. As parents, leaders, influencers, what can we do to reach and have a greater impact on the next generation? Please join me next week when I will discuss how to reach and make an impact on the next generation. See you next week.